Let's learn something really quick.
If you got the time, absolutely. And you got the discipline, there's no question about it.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great practice to put into your everyday life, you guys.
You generally regret the things you don't do, not the things you did do. Let me say it that way.
Mic drop. This was just awesome. I love meeting my guests in person, and it's a whole nother animal, and the energy is just electric. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. What is good, everyone? This is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, bringing incredible guests from all over the world, so sit back, relax, and tune in. My next guest was a successful clinical dentist for 30 years. She was the first woman president of the Minnesota Dental Association, spent 21 years as the national spokesperson for the American Dental Association. She has suffered the loss of her beautiful mother, her 19-year-old son to suicide, and her husband of 44 years. But she is the current president of an international women's group, also a grief counselor, death doula, and civil mediator. Please welcome Dr. Kimberly Harms. Dr. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Deanna. It's just a privilege to be here. Thank you so much.
That's a lot to fit into an intro. You haven't wasted any time.
I've lived a long life. I put a lot in there.
A full life with a lot of great experiences. And firstly, the one thing we didn't mention, I think that it's important to kind of highlight that you were born with 7 fingers, not a full 10 fingers. And despite that, you've gone on to do all these amazing things.
Probably due to thalidomide. We didn't know that in 1956 when I was born, and found out about thalidomide a few years later. That was a drug that was widely used in Europe, but not really used in the U.S. My mother just happened to be, while she was pregnant with me, to be going across country, stopping in Cincinnati where it was being tested. And then her best friend, also pregnant, was having great success with that drug, which was a drug to help prevent morning sickness. And Mom just had a few tablets, and I was born without fingers. Her friend's baby was born very deformed and eventually died. But we didn't know at that time what the cause was.
Well, I guess then you were blessed to only be born with 7 fingers. Then, I mean, because you're gorgeous. Look at you. Like you look amazing. So that didn't stop you. Was that ever hard to get over when you were younger?
When I was younger, it was very hard. I defined myself as someone who was defective. When I was young, I lost my mother. Went into a mental institution when I was 6. When she found out about the thalidomide, that just sent her over the edge.
Oh, wow.
And I lived with my father and my stepmother, and that was not really a good situation. So I didn't have any support at the time. And kids, even back in the 60s, were not really kind to people that were different, and I was different. So it was very hard. It defined my life for many, many years, and until I became an adult, and I realized it's who I am. It's part of me. I'm not perfect, and nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect, right?
And I learned to accept myself, so that it really now doesn't really play much. It doesn't have much of an effect on how I feel.
Yeah. No, well, obviously you didn't let it hold you back at all. I mean, you became a dentist for 30 years.
Well, yeah, that was, there was this really good looking guy in University of Maryland back in the 70s, and he was going to dental school. And I thought, maybe if I became a dentist and had a good job, he'd marry me. And it worked. So
it worked?
For only 3 years it worked, but that was the 70s. I'm sorry, that is not a good reason for anyone to go to dental school. It's a great profession for women. And now about 50% of the graduates are women. In those days, it was maybe 2 or 3%. So it was a new place to go, but it worked. My plan worked beautifully. And I love the profession very, very much. It was great. I practiced with my husband for many years. But it was, please don't use that as an example why you should. Don't go for a guy. Don't ever.
Well, I mean, look at your story. Look at how that worked out, though. How beautiful.
I was 19 when I got married, which my grandchildren remind me of now. And I say, no, you're not.
Well, maybe that's why you look so young, because you started young.
I did start very young. I'm 19.
You took the life by its horns and you wrestled it to the ground. And you made it become whatever you wanted to become. So I think that's great. And despite having to overcome being born with only 7 fingers, you became a very successful dentist.
It's amazing because once I got into dental school and got going, I realized that, what are patients going to think about this now? Because, I had never heard of a 7-fingered dentist. But I learned, I became a referee, basketball referee and a volleyball referee. So I was getting used to holding my hand up in public so people could see it. I spent most of my life hiding it. And the reality was, even in my last year, probably the last year I practiced, I had a patient who had been my patient for probably 25 years who said, "Oh my goodness, what happened to your hand?" And I said, "Well, it's been like that since birth." And she had no idea. She'd been there with her family and her children and our children, and she had no idea. So a patient's really, as long as you can provide good service and you're clinically proficient and you care about them, you're wonderful. So I was very busy as a dentist, but did not affect my dental career at all.
I think that's amazing because I think that, like you said, when you were younger, you made it that label that you're deformed, and when you overcame that, like your life just became super successful. You skyrocketed to success. I want to kind of highlight the work that you do internationally. So I know when we first connected, you had just come back from traveling, right? So you work in Poland with Ukrainian refugees. So can you share a little bit with us about the work that you do?
Yes, I'm president right now of the Delegation for Friendship Among Women, and it's a group that's been around for well over 50 years. And we go to emerging countries to help with women's issues. We help develop relationship and friendship with women in other countries. And we were able in Poland, which is a beautiful place. I had never been to. It's an amazing place. They are taking in many, many refugees, hundreds of thousands from Ukraine. And I was able to work and talk with some Ukraine refugees and hear kind of the stories, the horrible stories of war, and what they've been through, and their husbands and fathers were still in Ukraine. So it was an amazing experience for me, and we're hoping to do whatever we can to help them as they struggle with being displaced from the country they want to stay in.
Yeah, that has to be very surreal and kind of like a reality check of like your life versus their life and what they're going through, right? Because I think that over here, we're watching stuff happen on TV and we really don't feel it or can really see it firsthand and what that looks like. And so you had an opportunity to see what that really felt like for them in person, because that's a completely different experience.
Absolutely. And I do a lot of work in Rwanda. I have 65 libraries in my son's name, the Eric James Memorial Libraries in Rwanda. And I do a lot of work there. And they are the best grief counselors in the world because they went through a horrible genocide in 1994 where neighbors were killing neighbors. It wasn't even an invading army. It was their neighbors. And they have learned through reconciliation and forgiveness and justice. The perpetrators were in jail for 20 years, and we were there during that time. And they built an amazing, beautiful country. If you're going to go to Africa, check out Rwanda. It's unbelievable, and it's got the same safety level as like Canada. So if you're not worried about going to Canada, you shouldn't be worried about going to Rwanda, safety level 1.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have known that.
Yeah, people don't realize that, but they built that country up because they realized that if they didn't get rid of the hatred and the contempt for each other that they lived through, their children would live through the same thing. So as a sacrifice for the next generation, they learned to forgive and reconcile, and they have built a beautiful, safe, thriving country.
Yeah, no, I would like to do a safari one day. And, I watch people on social media, we can see everything on social media, and they post a lot of real-time content of they're on a safari right now. And I'm just like, gosh, that has got to be such an incredible experience just to be out there. And it's just a different landscape. You know what I mean? Well, let's get into some more serious stuff. Not something that we like to talk about every day, you guys, but it's something that we do, that does happen to us. You've experienced incredible loss. Talk to us about like that journey. Obviously I can't even imagine what that would feel like to lose a son to suicide, your mother, and then your husband. Like, oh my gosh, just a lot.
Well, I lost my mother the first time when I was 6, and she found out about the thalidomide. So she went into the hospital then, but then she took her life when I was 17. Even though she was bipolar, she was the best mother ever. And I think I want to really make, like, just because you have an emotional illness does not make you a bad mother. She was a fabulous mother. But that was devastating to me when we lost her. Then when my son, Eric, who was this brilliant young man, was so excited. He had gotten into his dream school, Columbia. They were actually recruiting him, believe it or not. He had gotten there for his first semester. He was elected to student government, which is, how do you do that in Columbia? He played in the jazz band. He had been a National Merit Scholarship winner, and he was working in plays with the students at Barnard. He had the best semester ever. He was also in love. And he went back. He was on top of the world. And 2 weeks into his second semester, his girlfriend broke up with him, which is a normal thing in life, right?
Yeah, right.
But that 19-year-old brain, which was not fully developed in managing stress, combined with that impulsive jazz piano behavior. I mean, that jazz pianists are impulsive. That's what makes them so good.
Yeah.
Was a deadly cocktail. And he was gone 45 minutes after the final breakup with his girlfriend. And it was such a shock. Our lives were shattered.
Yeah.
And I didn't really feel I could ever recover from that. I was in that dark pit that I just didn't see any way out. But I realized I had a nephew, a cousin of my husband's, who had lost his brother at same age, around 18, who had been drinking. His friends brought him home, left him in his car. Unfortunately, it was a Minnesota winter, and he froze to death in his car. And his parents never recovered. And this cousin came up to me 2 weeks after we lost Eric, and she was wagging his finger right in my face, which, is hard to take when you just lost a son.
Right. Yeah.
You ever allow yourself or your children to feel that they are not enough? Don't ever let them feel they're not enough, because he felt that he lost his parents.
Yeah.
The time he lost his brother. And so that gave me a whole new view of things,
Right.
that my despair was affecting everybody around me. And I had to work and kick and scream. And it took a lot of work. It took a number of years to work my way out of that despair pit and get to a point where I could live in the present. And it took a long time, but it took a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I think that's a message I just like to send it. It's worth the work.
Yeah. And to decide like, this is not what I want my life to look like, I mean, we're going to get into that, but I think that's incredibly brave of you and good for you. It's okay to feel that disparity and feel all those feelings, but you can't live there, right? And so what I say to people that might be struggling is like, you're doing the memory of the person you lost a disservice by not living your life to its fullest.
Absolutely. My son and my mother would want me to thrive,
Right.
And that's what we want. When we die, I want my family to thrive. And so I tell them now.
Yeah. Celebration of life, man.
Tell them.
Okay?
Yeah, tell them. Be happy when I'm gone.
So we have something in common, unfortunately. I lost my first husband about 9 years ago. He was very sick. He needed his third kidney transplant. He was addicted to steroids. So although I was administering dialysis, he was still injecting. And, and I just saw him giving up. Like, this larger than life man just was giving in to, like, he was just losing his battle with life. So I know that's not an easy thing to go through. And so it says here, your husband of 44, you lost him because of a broken heart after the death of your son. That has to be super duper hard.
Absolutely. Actually, he did also have an organ transplant. He had developed liver cancer right before Eric died, and so he had just had a liver transplant 6 months before Eric died. He was struggling physically as well as emotionally. And I got treated for depression. I mean, when you lose your mother and your son to suicide, get some. So I got treated for depression. But I'm a baby boomer, and we don't seek emotional care as much as we should. And he just, I call him a stubborn Norwegian. He's a stubborn Norwegian. He would not admit even that he was depressed, but I believe he was. And depression, untreated, when you're in that pit, if you don't get help and you don't get treated, it can affect your body. And people with depression have much higher rates of heart disease and stroke and so on. And 2 years after his heart checked out as being just great, because they don't give new livers to someone with a bad heart.
Right. Yeah, I know how it goes.
So the heart's got to be in good shape. 2 years after that, he was in surgery for quadruple bypass and a valve replacement and some other cardiac surgery for 9 hours. And eventually, over time, luckily we had him for another 10, 12 years. Unfortunately, over time, we transitioned into heart failure and he died. But I really, it's just 3 years ago, but I really believe it was from a broken heart. I believe that the depression is what set his heart off, because it was in great shape 2 years ahead of time. So I get another reason to fight your way out of that pit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, for me, I like watching my husband just kind of dwindle was the hardest part. And I really started grieving him before he passed, because he just was giving up. He would cry like, I can't take this anymore. He was in so much pain. It's like once they, like you said, he got a liver transplant, but it's like once like one thing happens, it's like it's like a domino effect. Like he needed open heart surgery. He had a blood vessel break inside of his lung. Like he was in and out of the hospital. First it started like once a month. Then it was like every other week. And then before he passed, he was in the hospital for 30 days. And it was just, it's really hard when you watch someone you love go through that journey. It's very difficult. And I think that he probably had some form of depression too, because, here he was like this big, strong bodybuilder that now cannot do anything really.
Oh boy. Yeah, I worked with hospice with my husband. He wanted to die at home, and it was a real privilege to be able to do that. But it's hard to watch someone go. It's hard to watch someone you love go, and then your identity has changed. You used to be part of a couple, and now, you're a widow, and like, well, what does that mean? And you're alone.
Yeah.
There's nobody there. Nobody knows if you're going to the grocery store, where you're at. It's a whole different change in your identity, and it's a very difficult thing to go through.
I'm glad you said that, because that was a hard thing for me to adapt to. Like, shit, nobody knows where I'm at, what I'm doing. I can do whatever the hell I want. And I'm really big into checking in. I think anybody who's in a relationship or married, you check in with each other. Oh, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And it's like, that was a very odd feeling for me. And sometimes I felt like liberated, like, okay, I can just do whatever I want. But the other times it's like, I can do whatever I want and nobody's going to know where I'm at.
Right after my husband, you're absolutely right. Right after my husband died, I had some surgical issues that needed to be taken care of. And I got home, I was laying in my bed, and I've got daughters, and they check on me. But
sure.
When you're in the house by yourself, there's no one that can kind of help you right then. So I was just laying there thinking, okay, if I die, how long will it take for them to find my body? I mean, your brain just goes to crazy places.
Oh, yeah.
First time, you're all by yourself, and there's nobody there that can come and help you if you have a problem. There's just nobody there, and it's a difficult adjustment to make.
Yes, it is. Okay, well, speaking of that, you've written a book. You ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For. So I'm assuming, let's let the audience know, you guys, I know this is not a great, exactly the most motivational conversation, but these are the conversations that you need to have to like really kind of talk about these hard subjects. I'm assuming the book was, the motivation was behind the things that you've experienced.
Yes. Especially after my husband died, and I started working with widows. I actually wrote a widows book too, and I do widows support groups. So I was working with widows in the support group, and I realized that we all have very difficult journeys. I had kind of taken everything over. My husband was a gradual decline, so the last thing I did was the taxes. The last 2 years, I hate taxes, but that was his job, and then I finally took that over. So when he passed away, I was kind of ready, except my grandkids weren't ready. They were just in despair. And I realized as I looked at myself and looked at my friends, many of them who had not learned how to do everything at home, and now they were just kind of paralyzed with, changing the light bulb, but what do they do,
Yeah.
So I thought that, I wish I had some sort of educational experience that would prepare me for death. We prepare people for lots of things, but we don't prepare them to die, and we're all going to die. It's like 100% of us are. So I started looking at, okay, what legacies can I leave? And I know that my mother, for instance, left me the legacy of love. And that has helped me to thrive at this point, even though, I really lost her at age 6 and then definitely at age 17, but that's her legacy to me. And I started thinking about the legacies we leave, and particularly to my grandchildren. So I've been talking to my grandchildren. We talk about Pop Pop at Christmas. My Christmas presents are from Nana and Angel Pop Pop. And we talk about, we have songs on our playlist for Pop Up. And I talk to them about, when I go, I want you guys to be happier. I let them know that, at some point in time, most people lose their grandparents. That's just kind of a fact of life, right? And I want them to be happy. And I know that I was successful because my little 8-year-old Heidi was standing at the dinner table a couple months ago, and she looked up at me and she goes, "Leona." And I said, Heidi, what? She goes, "Well, Leona, if what happens to Pop Up happened to you." And I said, "What do you mean, Heidi? What do you mean if I die?" "Oh, yeah, Deanna, if you were to die, can we still go on the Disney cruise?"
Out of the mouths of babes, right?
I said, yes, I want you to go on the Disney cruise. I want you to have a good life. Every time you have joy in your life, think about me. That's your legacy. Be joyful, thrive. And so I know it works because of that experience. But I think that's what we need to leave our family better off than us. Like the Rwandans, they made sacrifices now so that their kids could live in a safe, peaceful country. We need to do that. We need to emotionally prepare,
yes,
as well as physically prepare, financially prepare our loved ones for a time when we're not here, for a time lived without us, so that their journey, they have a softer landing.
Yeah.
Die. I want them to have a softer landing. It's going to be hard, but I want them to land softly. I want them to remember me with joy.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the book. And the first book talks about the legacies. The second book part talks about death and dying, what people feel. A certain percentage feel that this happens after death or that happens after death. And how do we feel about death? And then the last part is a step-by-step workbook to go through all the things you need to do, like, make sure your passwords are known, make sure you write all these things down, so that when I go, my kids would just have a little binder and everything's going to be in there, all my passwords, all my information, all my, accounts that I have. And in the back, I put my titles of my car, my birth certificate, anything they're going to need after I go is in one little binder. I hate to think that our lives now are down to one binder, but they are. So I have it all in that binder. So they're not going to have to go searching through all my, drawers to find things. My husband's filing system was plastic bags. So
boy.
I've done that. I know how that goes.
Yeah.
They have all in one spot. And I'm trying to just let us start to think of our life as a graduation. We're going to graduate from life and go on to whatever we go on to. Right. But let's make sure the people that we love have a soft landing when we go. And that emotional component is an important part too. And I talk about leaving legacy letters, legacy love letters, apology letters, reconciliation letters. Let's reconcile what you can. Let's learn from those Rwandans how to do it. And so that when we go, those left behind will be in a better place. That's the whole theme of the book.
I like that. And I think that's very thoughtful. And some people might think that that's selfish, but I think it's selfless, to kind of like be prepared to set things up that, you kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? You close all those like open spaces, or, I don't know the word I'm looking for. I think you understand what I'm trying to say, but I think that that's very thoughtful and a great way to kind of like set things up for success when we move on to that next phase, whatever that looks like for us and whatever your belief system is. I know that when my late husband, he had a lot of great things in order, but there were a lot of things that were left undone. I guess that's the word. With that being said, Dr. Kim, where can people find you, connect with you, and purchase your book?
They can find me on drkimberlyharms.com, and they can purchase my book, Are You Ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For, at Barnes & Noble or Amazon. And again, the important thing is the point of the book is to show your love for your next generation by being ready.
For sure. You guys, I'm going to put those links in the show notes. I know that this is a subject that is very uncomfortable for some people to talk about or to even like really accept and wrap their head around, but it is the fact of life. And we all, as my old best friend used to say, we all have a reservation we can't cancel. And it's just the fact of the matter, however you want to slice or dice it. So go click the links, go connect with Dr. Kim, go purchase the book, and just prepare yourself, prepare your family, and leave a good legacy behind for yourself. Dr. Kim, this is the part of the show where I like to ask for last words of wisdom or advice. What would you like to leave with us today?
No matter what you go through in life, no matter what you experience, and I've learned this from people all over the world, you can fight your way, but it takes work to get out of that pit. And you can live a strong, thriving life, and you can show your love to the next group of people that come behind you by leaving a good legacy.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. You've had a very full life and have led an incredible journey. You lived your legacy for sure. You're setting an example for all of us. So thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Ian. This has been great.
You're welcome. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, review, comment, share, all those good things. And I'll be back soon with more dynamic guests.